This session is all about going on culinary adventures at home. Sometimes a big international trip isn't in the cards for an immediate vacation, but we can still take our taste buds around the world with companies like League of Kitchens, where cooking instructors from across the globe share their recipes and cooking techniques with visitors at home. Sonya Kharas, the League of Kitchens program manager, explains more.
Welcome, Sonia. I am so excited to have you here from League of Kitchens, and I'm just all kinds of stoked to hear about some of the experiences that you offer and to learn a little bit more about authentic travel, especially when you have these experiences in your own backyard. You don't have to travel very far to
Absolutely.
have a wonderful taste of another destination.
Well, thank you for having us. We're really excited.
Excellent, excellent. So talking about League of Kitchens, there's culinary experiences everywhere now. Cooking classes and food tours are so so popular right now. And I'm wondering what sets League of Kitchens apart from the typical food tour or cooking class or other culinary experiences.
Yeah. So I think to start off, to kind of give people a sense of what our classes look like, they all happen in somebody's home, which I think is a very unique feature. There is the opportunity not just to be in their kitchen and taste their food, but also see the context of how that food is prepared and eaten. So, for example, our Argentinian instructor has this incredible collection of Argentinian artwork, and she's passionate about Argentinian music. And so the second you walk into her home, it feels like you've been transported someplace else. And I think that those types of details are things that are difficult to translate when you take the food out of that context and bring it into a commercial kitchen space. There's also all of the tools that people have. Yamini, our Indian instructor, has all of these amazing pots that she inherited from her mother. And they're totally different than in shape, in material, in feel, from the pots that, kind of Western Americans might have in their own kitchens. And so there are all of those levels of detail that I think come across when you're in somebody's home. And then there's just the fact of being in someone else's space. Often our instructors' families are there. Our Trinidadian instructor lives with 4 out of her 5 children, and they're often coming through and tasting food and seeing what's in the kitchen and talking to students. And so there's a real immersive experience that happens that goes beyond just the kind of specific dishes or cooking classes. I think to go along with that, something that people don't often realize is that our cooking classes are quite small. So because they happen in instructors' apartments, and because we're based in New York City where apartments tend to be small, there are usually about 4 to 6 students in each class. And our kind of flagship workshop, our immersion workshop, is 5.5 hours long. So you have a really small, intimate group of students who are really spending the entire day in somebody else's home. And I think that one of the most common bits of feedback we get from students after our workshops is that they kind of show up at this person's house, they feel a little awkward, they might not know anyone, they might never have been to that neighborhood before, and by the end of the 5.5 hours, they feel like the instructor has become a new favorite aunt or, a surrogate grandmother. And I think that there is a real meaningful connection, that social connection, that can take place when you're spending that much time in such a small group in somebody else's home. This spring, we also, in addition to our cooking workshops, piloted a series of shopping tours that we've been doing in partnership with Atlas Obscura, who, if you don't know them, they're also an incredible organization. And in those, they're not in the instructors' homes, but the instructor is taking students around their neighborhood to all of their favorite grocery stores, snack places, where they buy their bread, where they buy their baking dishes, their coffee pots, their snacks for their kids. And I think that those tours are also really different than many of the other food tours that we see, at least here in New York City, because instead of having an outsider come into a neighborhood or a community and show people around, our instructors have relationships with these store owners. It's where they shop every day. It's their culture. It's their community. It's their neighborhood. And I think that is also something really unique about the work that we're doing and the offerings that we have.
Yeah, that sounds very unique. And even traveling, sometimes it takes that little extra step to go to someone's home and to be welcomed in and to have an authentic meal inside someone's home versus a restaurant. And,
yeah, absolutely.
That's a wonderful experience to have right in your backyard if you're in New York.
Yeah. And, all of our instructors are immigrants. They all live in New York City, but their experiences being immigrants in New York City are very varied. Some of them have been here since the 1970s, and some of them have been here for just a few years. They live in all sorts of different neighborhoods. They're connected to different communities, different religious groups. Some of them have children who live here. Some of them don't. I mean, their experiences as immigrant New Yorkers are really different. And I think that, it helps show, especially in a city like New York, there's no one way to be a New Yorker. And I think for New Yorkers and travelers alike, that's a really exciting part of the experience to get to see that.
Yeah, wonderful. So you have 11 instructors, correct?
Yeah.
What I saw. Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about how some of these instructors found League of Kitchens or League of Kitchens found them? And, how have the experiences evolved since it began?
Sure. In terms of finding instructors, there is no one answer to that question. We have, all of our instructors are immigrants, and they are all amazing home cooks, and they are all really good storytellers. They are comfortable sharing about themselves, their culture, their cuisine. And it's a really specific set of skills that we're looking for. We do a ton of community outreach to different organizations in the city. We post on Craigslist. We hold information sessions. We connect with other organizations like IRC, the International Rescue Committee, to kind of work with people who are already working and doing job placement with immigrants. But there's no one answer. So, for example, our Uzbek instructor found out about us because one of her friends is a food writer in Uzbekistan and read an article about us and reached out and said, you should do this. You're in New York. Our Argentinian instructor, her daughter was looking on Craigslist and saw the post and said, Mom, you would be great for this. Our Greek instructor has a daughter who runs a Greek food stall in Essex Street Market, which is an amazing food market here in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and is a friend of the founder. So, there's really I wish for my job, which includes recruiting and hiring new instructors, that there was one easy way to answer that question, but there really isn't. Everyone kind of finds us through a different route. But it is, like I said, a very specific set of skills, and because we don't have a staff person at each workshop, we are really dependent on finding exceptional cooks, hosts, teachers, experts, cultural ambassadors to be our instructors. And so it's a lot of work. To hire our first 6 instructors, we did auditions with over 150 people. Oh, wait, hold on. Can I take that back?
Yeah.
Sorry. So to find our first 6 instructors, we interviewed over 150 people. From that pool, we did in-home cooking auditions with about 15 and then hired about 6. And so we are really out there talking to and meeting with large numbers of people in the city to try to find those shining stars, because they really are at the heart of what we do, and the success of our classes is so dependent on their skills, their personality, their expertise, their generosity and warmth. And as someone who is lucky enough to work with them every day and call them my coworkers, I mean, they're really just an extraordinary group of people. So
wonderful.
Yeah, I feel very lucky. Not to mention the food.
Oh, yeah. So I'm sure you've tasted a lot of these dishes that these wonderful instructors are making.
Yeah.
Were there any dishes in particular that were like fun or maybe more challenging to make? I'm interested to learn more about some of the cooking process.
Absolutely. So we work really closely with our instructors to craft the menus for their classes. And the menus are all things that you would find in a home kitchen, as opposed to restaurant food. And I think that's really important because often in a lot of other countries, the kind of fullest expression of the cuisine happens in the home. And a lot of the dishes on our menus are either too time-consuming or too difficult or too expensive to make their way onto a restaurant menu, or they're considered kind of too humble or simple to be in a restaurant. And so I think our menus are this delightful combination of kind of complicated, challenging, unique dishes, and then also some incredible simple fare that's really easy to recreate at home. So some of my favorite things to make in the workshops themselves are those dishes that are probably just too difficult for me to tackle at home. So for example, Demira, our Uzbek instructor, makes these incredible dumplings by hand, and she has a 3-foot-long dowel from Home Depot that she uses to roll out the most perfectly even paper-thin dough. And then she shows everybody how to fill them and fold them, and she both boils them and fries them. And they're like these, just the most delicious things I've ever eaten. But probably, I don't know if I should admit that I wouldn't tackle it on my own, but definitely some of these dishes are things that people traditionally made in groups. When Demira talks about cooking some of these dishes, she talks about all the people coming together for a party or a wedding and sitting around and making dumplings together. It's not something that someone would do alone in their kitchen for 4 hours, because it is really time-consuming. So there are dishes like that I just love getting to experience in the context of another class and with other participants in the class, because it really forms this collective process. And then there are other dishes, like Demira does this really simple, delicious potato salad that's cooked potatoes, and cold cucumber and dill. And it's so unusual and like such an interesting combination that I had never had, but it's become my kind of go-to summer potato salad to make. And so there are also these dishes that have become real staples of my own cooking.
That's wonderful. And when you were talking about Demira, I was remembering back one of the videos that you shared and that we have been sharing on our social media. I think Demira's husband at one point made a dumpling that was like super spicy or like had some extra spice in there, and if you get that one, then you're lucky, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. In all of our instructors, there are these little, often really playful, cultural, like bits of wisdom that get mixed into the cooking experience. And I think that's such a great example of something that you would never experience in a restaurant, but that kind of makes all of this feel so much more personal and so much more real, that, this isn't food without people behind it who are having fun in the kitchen together, who are playing jokes on each other, who are kind of literally cooking certain traditions and cultural stories and expressions into the food that they eat on a daily basis. So I think that's a great example. Another one that I shared with someone recently is that our Indian instructor has a menu that is all foods that are healing, kind of according to Ayurvedic tradition, which is something that she's really interested in. And there's like a kid's nursery rhyme that's basically like khichdi, which is the main dish in the menu. Khichdi has 4 friends, ghee, pickle, papad, and chas. And it, in Hindi it rhymes, and it's this cute little song that Yamini sings in her kitchen when she's remembering kind of which foods go with which other foods. And so I think that there are all these like little moments like that happen in the workshops that are so special, that really situate the food in this larger cultural context.
Absolutely wonderful. That's so special.
Yeah.
And it really makes me think, today we've been talking about how food is really a universal language in itself. It's a way to connect with people that you really can't connect in any other way or any other platform. And food really does bring people together. And so many times, around the dinner table, the family comes together, and it's really the only time they have to be together. And I know in America, that might be different in each household, but food still really is held to a high level of importance.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we feel is, over the course of the workshop, there's real relationships being built, both between the instructor and the students, and between the students among themselves. And I don't think it's coincidence that kind of relationship building happens in the kitchen and around the table when you're eating food. There really is something so universal about the experience and so enjoyable about the experience, that people kind of let their guards down, they feel comfortable with one another, they can talk about what things taste like or remind them of. There's so many personal stories that emerge for people when they're talking and thinking about food and tasting food and smelling food and being around it. So I absolutely agree with you that this is kind of a universal experience that helps us to bridge what might otherwise be seen as cultural differences to have meaningful social interaction and build real relationships with one another.
Excellent. Yeah, so, it's such a wonderful way of connecting. So League of Kitchens has been featured, I was looking at your press page, you've been featured by dozens of wonderful publications and platforms and podcasts, TV shows.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful. I'm wondering, with all this publicity, how busy are you guys? I mean, how many tours, not tours, cooking classes have you um, booked recently?
Yeah. I mean, we're really lucky to have gotten a lot of great press and a lot of different kinds of coverage. And I think one of the exciting outcomes of that is that a lot of different people now know about our workshops. And so we host workshops every weekend during the year, except in July and August, which we take off from public workshops in part because a lot of our instructors are traveling back to their home countries, and because people in New York are traveling, and because it's hot, and a lot of our instructors don't have air conditioning.
Oh.
But other than that, we're doing workshops consistently throughout the year. And it's a really interesting mix of people who are coming. We get some very experienced cooks and professional chefs, and we get some people who have never picked up a knife before. We get men and women. We get some kids as young as 13. And people well into their 70s. And we get people who live in New York and are native New Yorkers or transplants to the city. And more we get travelers, which has been a really interesting piece of the work for us, to think that we are kind of somehow shaping tourist experiences of New York City is really exciting. And so I think right now maybe about a fourth to a third of our students don't live in New York City and are visiting from other parts of the country or from other countries globally.
Wow, that's exciting. Is there like a certain amount of time that you should book ahead of time? I'm sure the instructors need to know how many people are coming and get the right amount of ingredients. But let's say if a traveler is in New York right now and is like, wow, I really want to do this, how much time in advance do you need to book?
Yeah, it's a funny question. There's no rhyme or reason to how that all happens. For example, we're at Tuesday, and we have, I think, 5 or 6 workshops this coming weekend. 4 of them are totally booked, and 2 of them still have spaces in them. So, sometimes just the week before there are still spaces, and sometimes our classes book up months in advance. So it's really, I wish from the administrative end that there was a kind of clearer rule about how that happened. But, we do try to keep an eye on things, and as classes are filling, we try to add more classes. So, our hope is that there's always something available for someone who's interested.
Nice.
We also offer private workshops, which aren't really on our website, but if there's ever a group of people who want to do a private workshop, if they're traveling with their family or friends or coworkers, we do those both on the weekends, depending on instructor availability, and also during the weekdays. And that's been something really fun. We just did workshops for 28 college students who were visiting from New England, who many of whom had never been to New York City before. We divided them in groups and sent them to various different neighborhoods to cook with different instructors. And so there's a lot of other opportunities like that we have. So we're definitely, as a company, quite flexible and are always trying to figure out whatever works best for both our instructors and the students.
What a cool experience for that class, for everybody to have, a different cooking experience from a different culture, and then to come back probably, at the end of that day and be like, well, I made this, and I learned how to make this, and I learned this really cool cultural thing from, this chef and, this, wonderful cook. So I could just imagine the conversations that might have come out of
Yeah.
that.
And I mean, I think that's one of the really cool things about having 11 different instructors is that they're all different. Their cuisines are all different. Their personalities are different. The neighborhoods that they live in are different. Their families and personal experiences of how they came to the United States is different. And so, you know, I think that whether it's one person taking multiple workshops or whether it's a group like the one I just described where they kind of divided up and took different workshops and then came back together and talked about it, you know, it really helps hit home the fact that these are all unique people and different cultures and different cuisines. And I think that that really helps to move us away from kind of stereotyping or lumping groups of people together. You know, not all immigrants in New York City are the same or have similar experiences. And I think you really see that when you meet our different instructors and go into their homes and spend the day with them.
Wonderful. And that kind of brings me into my next curiosity is, you know, today's summit has really been about venturing out and moving away, you know, from home just for a few days or, you know, a couple of weeks and experiencing something else. But League of Kitchens really reminds us that there's so much to experience at home and, you know, so many amazing people to meet and talk to and stories to hear. And I'm wondering if you've seen how League of Kitchens has helped to encourage community connection. So you've kind of talked about that here where we're learning, you know, so many individual stories of immigrants and how they found their way here. But, you know, sharing family traditions and really educating each other on our own customs. Have you seen how League of Kitchens has really helped foster this kind of exchange?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are a few different ways to think about that question. You know, I think what we spoke about was these, you know, because of the size of the workshop, the length of the workshop, the way they're structured, the cultural context of being in someone's home, that there really are these relationships that get formed over the course of the class. And I think that one outcome of that for many students is that it helps get them excited about going home and cooking with their own families and getting in touch with their own culinary traditions. I think that, you know, for all of our instructors, they are so rooted in where they come from, and food for them is a way to express themselves and express love for their friends and family. And it's a really beautiful, joyous thing to be around. And so I think that there's inspiration there that a lot of people take home and want to bring that same self-exploration, self-expression, creativity, hospitality, generosity, love into their own homes. I think another way that we see that happening is changes within the instructors themselves. You know, for almost all of our instructors, they learn to cook from a very young age, 8 years old, 9 years old. It's something that they've been doing basically their entire lives, and often without much recognition or celebration of the incredible skill and knowledge and expertise that they bring to the table every single day, often 3 times a day. And I think one of the things of having students in your home who want to learn from you, who see your skill, who ask questions, who kind of it creates an opportunity for them to really showcase their knowledge. And I think that we have seen that transform the way our instructors think of themselves, you know, becoming an expert and a teacher, and having skills that are valued by society and that they can get paid to share with other people. And then also they get feedback from the students. We do surveys with every student after the workshops, and so to hear, just how much that experience was valuable to their students, I think is a great source of pride for them. And one short story that just is, for me, so touching to this point is Rashana, our Nepali instructor, grew up cooking, learned to cook when she was 8 years old. She got married when she was 16. She was responsible for cooking for her entire family. And after she taught her first workshop, she lives in Flushing, Queens with her husband and 2 of her 3 grown children. I sent her her first set of reviews from students. And she said that she printed them out and gathered her whole family around, and they all read them together. And her daughter said, Mom, I can't believe this. We've always been taking you for granted. We had no idea that you were such, we always knew your food was amazing, but we never knew that you really had anything this special to share. And so I think that we see this kind of transformation within our instructors where they really are in a position where this thing, cooking, that is so invisible for so many people in so many parts of the world, gets put out into the light and valued and celebrated in a way that it might never have done before. And I also will say that a lot of the relationships, this is kind of outside of what we're doing. We have no control over it. But a lot of the relationships that are formed during our workshops extend well past the kind of official time of the class. So, for example, Mirta, our Argentinian instructor, recently had a student who worked at the Natural History Museum in Manhattan and found out that Mirta had never been and organized a private after-hours tour for her. And, 2 weeks later, her and her daughter went to the museum and got this private tour with one of her students. Wow. Cool. Or Demira, our Uzbek instructor, had a student who a few months later went to Samarkand, which is where Demira is from, while Demira and her husband happened to be there. And they met up, and Demira took her around her hometown. And so, a lot of our students and instructors stay in touch, and kind of that relationship that gets formed, during the workshop, that might be the start, but for many people it's not the end, and it kind of continues in all of these really special ways.
Wow, it's just amazing, and it's amazing to think how powerful food really is. And thank you so much for sharing that today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with viewers before we head out?
If you're in New York City, come join us. It's a really, we have this amazing group of women who are just such incredible home cooks, but incredible storytellers, and really are eager to host people and share their experiences and their lives with you. So we hope we'll see you when you're in New York.
Excellent, excellent. I know you'll see me next time I'm out there. I'm getting myself a cooking workshop.
There you go.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sonya. It was such a pleasure to have you here today, and I'm looking forward to seeing how League of Kitchens expands and becomes even more a part of the community.
Thanks.